Who am I?
Richard Kazimer, media veteran.
Why I got in radio is because I'm good with a knife.
Contributor in Perth, Australia.
Our friend Richard Kazimer in the United States.
How are you guys enjoying the 19th century? Is that working out for you? How can you say, I'm not making fun of you as a race, I'm making fun of you as black performers?
I think as a country, Americans are as patriotic as the most rabid UK football hooligan.
Who am I?
Richard S. Kazimer. I don't actually know if we've assigned him Mission Impossible. We sometimes make his task a little bit harder. Time to catch up with our friend in the United States, Richard Kazimer. Good morning.
That is a fitting theme because I have been likened to 180 pounds of TNT with a half-inch fuse, so it does work out.
Yeah, maybe it does work out. Certainly Mission Impossible. Hey, something that's certainly been very much at the forefront in the news here, and I would imagine it finds its way into the news there from time to time, is education, which of course is going to be close to anyone's heart. The government here is now talking about getting back to basics with things like, reading, writing and arithmetic, all that sort of stuff. What's the situation with the American education system, and overall, how do people view it? I mean, in the movies we tend to see many schools in America are portrayed as being war zones. Is that a fair depiction?
No, I would say not. Inner cities, yes, but that's just indigenous to high crime areas anyway. And then you have your occasional shootings in the shopping mall, and people are mentally unbalanced, and they have a tendency to take out their frustrations on as many people as possible, schools, malls. As far as the education is concerned, we have been getting back to the basics for many years. Unfortunately, the basics aren't good enough. U.S. students' test scores are lower than some former third world countries, and they've been on the decline for many years.
Well, we see the arguments here have always been about falling standards. So I suppose in that sense we're probably suffering the same thing, although by the sound of things you're further along the track than we are. Well, what has been over there the suggestion for the falling scores? What's been the suggestion as the cause of it?
We have an outcome-based education, and that is premised on the number of students that graduate rather than the quality of the education they're receiving. And the problem is that we don't have a national education or curriculum standard. States set their own standards for students and or teacher performances. Rarely are teachers held accountable for any sort of merit standard. The students are graded on a curve, allowing even some of the most challenged students to get a passing grade. And it's all about getting the people off to the next grade, and we are producing functioning illiterates in many cases. But a news story just crossed my desk today, and this is good news, that the National Governors Association and the Council of Chief State School Officers are drafting a national guideline that they're going to identify a list of subjects that kids should learn at each grade level so that it'll be uniform state by state. So if a child lives in one state and goes across the country to move, if they're in the fourth grade, for example, they will be on the same par as that fourth grade when they get there. They won't be above or below. More affluent communities have better teachers and more resources than lesser communities. We have an example now in Kansas City, Missouri, where they're closing 20-some-odd schools out of 60 schools in that district because they don't have any money.
Well, purely and simply because they don't have any money, for no other reason. It's not that the demand isn't there, simply because they don't have any money.
It is that they don't have any money, but if you don't have any money, you can't pay your teachers. If you can't pay your teachers, then you don't have qualified people to teach the children.
Well, how are schools funded in the US? How are schools funded?
What we mean by public schools is that's a free open enrollment to all students that live within the school district of your town or your city, and that's funded by your state and local taxes. Then we have private schools that are recognized by the states. They're academies, they're sectarian schools, Catholic schools. Those private schools do not receive any state money. That's done truly by enrollment, endowments, donations. And then in areas where they're allowed to exist, charter schools. And these are semi-private schools that do receive some state money, but they have a higher entrance exam requirements and longer waiting lists. So those are the three schools that we have here in the United States.
So overall, is the ideal objective, if you can afford it, to go to private schools, is it?
Exactly. But again, you have a long waiting list. The same thing would be in charter schools. And then there are a lot of people who opt to do homeschooling.
How popular is homeschooling? You hear of it talked about a fair bit, but in the final wash-up, how many people actually do go in for homeschooling? Do you have any figures?
There's no no number on it because it's hard to tell. If you don't show up to a school, there's nobody coming to your home. The truant officer doesn't really exist anymore. If you don't enroll your child in a school, if you say, well, I'm pulling my child out of this school because of the education is subpar, that child pretty much goes off the radar. You don't know. It used to be more in the forefront, I would say maybe 5-10 years ago. Now it's either accepted or it's fallen by the wayside. We just don't know.
It's truly a bizarre set of situations, though, isn't it?
Every time the new president comes into office, education is always the first thing that they talk about and always the first thing that they neglect. So hopefully with this new standard coming out, we'll see some changes.
So something else that's also interesting, and something I was picking up there, it seems to me that, like here, teachers in the United States don't like any benchmark that measures their performance and how well they're doing. It's something that also here they resist. Why is that the case, do you think?
Self-preservation, insecurity. So once you've gotten your teacher's degree and you've been entrenched in the school system for many years, I mean, a lot of these people are career teachers, that they don't feel that they have any accountability. And perhaps heretofore they haven't had any accountability. But there is a cause and effect when you see children that are, again, functioning illiterates that don't even know the basics. There has to be some sort of correlation between who is teaching them, what they're being taught, and what they haven't learned. It's all about accountability. Here in Massachusetts, for example, teachers are held accountable. And there are some states that are getting on board with that where they're actually testing the teachers. They're taking the teachers and having them take tests every couple of years, even on the basics of English and history and math. If the teacher doesn't pass the test, they don't work.
But that's something that's coming in some states and slowly being introduced. I dare say in other states it would be like it is here, still being resisted, yes?
Yes, indeed. There are teachers' unions, but it's in their best interest to be providing the best quality service that you can. And if somebody has been teaching for 30 or some odd years and they're mired in their own mediocrity, it's time for them to move on because it's all about the children.
Indeed. Something else that might be moving on, certainly moving on in terms of what it plans to do. It's not something that we've ever known here, but the US Postal Service is now talking about cutting out Saturday deliveries. Now, we've never had Saturday deliveries, so I dare say that's causing a bit of consternation, is it?
The thing about the U.S. Postal Service, and no disrespect to the postal workers, but like many government agencies, the U.S. Postal Service has fallen victim to being very bloated, a lot of unaccountable, top-heavy management, antiquated technology, poor business model. They can't compete with the private sector services. There's less mail. So it makes sense, unfortunately, diminish the services and then charge more for it.
Well, actually, bearing in mind, I know how it's changed a bit over the years, but certainly at one stage when I was reading about the US Postal Service, it does provide services that many Australians would be envious of. Putting the Saturday deliveries aside for one moment, also understand that it does a pick-up and delivery point at your mailbox as long as you have all the necessary stamps on it, and that's the reason for raising the red flag. That's something that was never offered here, for example.
It was a standard here. I remember if you didn't have a stamp, you could put a coin on the envelope with a clothespin and put it on your mailbox, and the postal carrier would take care of it for you. But those days are gone. With all the cutbacks, the cost of doing business, they're just going to phase it out. Is it going to make that much difference? Probably not, because personal mail has diminished.
Yeah, I was going to say smaller and diminishing, and I dare say that when you start to talk about the big packages, and I know Australia Post here have really gone into the big packages and fast delivery and all that in a big way, would it be correct to say that the US Postal Service, it's just not going to compete with people like FedEx, is it?
They have not, and that's one of the reasons why they've had to raise their prices and cut their staff and cut their services so much, is because they could not go head-to-head. They waited too long to get on board with new technology, and FedEx and UPS and even private mail service companies. Mailboxes, etc., is a huge franchise over here, so you can go and get your post box at a mailboxes, etc. Years ago, it used to be that the only place you could have mail delivered was at the post office, and you could not go in if the post office was closed on a Saturday or Sunday. You couldn't go in and get your mail. The franchises, you have a key to open that store door in the off hours and get your mail, and the post office cannot compete with that.
Yeah, mind you, I must say the post office here has always offered that service. The whole stopping Saturday deliveries, is that something that's caused any consternation there, or is it really just what you see as a further diminishing of a already diminishing service?
You're right. right. It is. I think it's acceptable maybe in some of the rural areas where people are a little more concerned about it, but in the bigger metropolitan areas or heavily populated areas, no, it's mostly junk mail you get on Saturdays anyways. People aren't going to miss it.
Okay, something else that gets talked about a fair bit, and here recently it's been talked about again in the United States, is the issue of food preservatives, and indeed how much and how many different preservatives are in food. What is the present situation in the United States? And I believe it's regulated by the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration in the United States. What are the current regulations relating to preservatives and additives in food?
If it doesn't kill you right away, put it in. That seems to be the FDA standard. A lot of stuff has been passed, a lot of stuff that we just take for granted that's in. It's all by the numbers. It's almost like collateral damage. There's an acceptable amount of deaths per year from either preservative or an additive.
Have they ever proven conclusively that a specific preservative or additive has been responsible for somebody's death? Has that ever been established?
But then it goes back to pre-existing conditions. If someone has an allergic reaction and they suffer a heart attack or an asthmatic attack or something like that, if it's something so blatant that everybody gets it, then they will do something about it. If it's a minuscule amount of people and therefore you can use an alternative product to get your nutrition or whatever, then they'll let it go. Aspartame is a good example. You know what aspartame is?
Yeah, we call it aspartame, but yes, I know the stuff you mean. It's a sweetener.
When the FDA allowed that, they did virtually no studies at all on it. The molecular derivative is that of wood grain alcohol. Now, I am deathly allergic to this. I cannot even have a piece of gum that has it in. I am on the floor writhing in pain and headaches. But it is in just about every single food product you can think of over here, and it's purely acceptable.
Is there ever much discussion about the issue of preservatives? I mean, certainly we have some groups here. We have a group very active here in Perth on the subject of additives. A book written by a lady called Julie Eady called Additive Alert that looks at various different additives and also talks about how those additives are viewed around the world. And of course the Europeans are fairly well known for being fairly tough on additives. But is there ever much discussion on this in the United States? And if so, which way does it go?
More about additives than preservatives. Now, there are two separate things. You know, the preservatives, there's not a product you can buy over here unless it's purely organic, and even that is a broad term. There's not something you can buy over here that doesn't contain a preservative that's used to prevent bacterial or fungal growth, prevent discoloration, or slowing the ripening process. Additives, on the other hand, are different. Those are the things to enhance the flavor, the texture, or whatnot. That is an issue. There is some concern over here, and again, it goes back to the reactions that people have, the allergic reactions. Peanut is a big deal because purportedly so many, especially young people, children, have allergies to peanuts.
Yeah, ditto here.
So you'll see food products that say this product not necessarily may contain peanuts, but may have come in contact with machinery that came in contact with peanuts. That's how anal some of the people are getting over here because of it. And then there's also the jury's out on whether or not there are actually as many peanut allergies in children as are being reported. There's one theory that they should be eating more peanuts to develop an immunity to it and not just have a knee-jerk reaction that peanuts are the death knell for any of these children.
Yeah, I sort of wonder how long it's going to be before somebody finally cottons onto the fact that the real issue is that people eat diseased diets, effectively.
This is true, but then you get into the food manufacturers that would say, oh, heavens, no, that can't possibly be it. It has to be the person's problem.
Yeah, well, I suppose when you're making money out of it. But then again, are people willing to, especially when they, and trust me, at some point they're going to finally cotton onto this, and there's going to be a hell of a row between people like food companies and drug companies and what have you. And I guess in your country it's going to be a very interesting battle because some of those people carry a fair bit of clout, don't they?
Yes, they do. I am seeing, though, more of a choice. I shop at two supermarkets, and there couldn't be more of a contrast. One is a major franchise, and one is a lesser franchise, but more organic, more consumer-oriented than the other one. And I am seeing more and more varieties of all-natural products and organic-based products than before, and also the prices are comparable. So the consumers are out there, they're becoming savvy shoppers and asking for alternatives instead of just accepting the prepackaged stuff we're used to.
Beautiful. Richard, as always, a pleasure talking to you. We're out of time, so we'll have a chat next week.
All right, brother. Go Dockers.